Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session of dtalks or Disruptive Talks on Literacy and Education. I am your host, Mashood. We have been continuing to bring speakers who have created transformational change in the area of education. And we often ask ourselves in this forum that what are the different ways in which we can enable literacy for all. There is a foundational learning crisis. There, many children still cannot read, write, and do basic arithmetic. But literacy, as we know, is the very first step, right? What happens after that, and the larger goal or the larger vision that we want to prepare our children for right from the very early ages is to be a citizen and an active citizen and a very successful citizen of the 21st century world. They need to have the skills that it takes, which are required in a completely dynamic world, a fast changing world. They need to be problem solvers, and they need to also have a sense of humanity and social awareness as well. So, if you're talking about developing 21st century learners, uh, the most important fulcrum or the most important stakeholder that we need to work with together and to have a buy-in from are the teachers. And one such organization which has been leading change in the area of developing the capacity of teachers so that they can help children become 21st century learners, problem solvers, and active citizens is Tech Mahindra Foundation. It is a foundation, as you know, working in several parts of India, and we are very honored to be joined by the COO of Tech Mahindra Foundation, uh, Mr. Chetan Kapoor. As many of us would know, Chetan has been in the sector for several years now, and he's leading the Tech Mahindra Foundation's operations as a chief operations officer, and he has also conceptualized the foundation's smart skill development program, which is the one of the largest CSR-led urban skill development programs in India. And before working in Tech Mahindra, he has also been actively involved in several social development organizations, including Pratham, America Indian Foundation, Plan India, has worked with many of these organizations as well, and has also collaborated with other organizations such as ITC, Ernst Young, and Aditya Birla Skill Foundation as well. So we would like to welcome Chetanji to Detox today. Chetanji, we are very excited and looking forward to your presentation on how we can build teachers for the 21st century learners. And we look forward to your presentation having a discussion after that as well.
Thank you so much, Mashood. Thank you for inviting me to this prestigious forum. Delighted to be here and to share with the audience who's with us today on this, I think, very, very important topic that you've picked up for discussion, which is building teachers for 21st century learners. So I'll be more than happy to share my views and my thoughts on this. And thank you for considering Tech Mahindra Foundation to be one of the leading agencies which is working in this space. Yes, that's something that is extremely important to us and is very close to our hearts as well. So just to begin, I would, if you would permit me, I would want to just share a brief presentation about the work that Tech Mahindra Foundation does with a focus on our work in teacher education.
Right here, and we are looking forward to the presentation, and we'd also encourage all those who are watching this live to share their questions and ideas on Chetanji's presentation, and we will try our best to take some of them towards the end of the presentation. So, Chetanji, we can see your presentation. The stage is yours.
Fine. Thank you so much, Mashood. So yes, I represent Tech Mahindra Foundation, which is the corporate social responsibility arm of Tech Mahindra. While we are, a part of a very large corporate, as the audience would be aware, Tech Mahindra is one of the leaders when it comes to the IT sector in India, having a presence in close to 90 countries across the world. But ever since the company started, we have been very serious about the idea of giving back to the society. And it was with this intent that Tech Mahindra Foundation came into being in the year 2007. And since then, we have been working close to the ground. We look upon Tech Mahindra Foundation more as an implementing organization rather than just a funding organization. We, of course, are funding some large number of projects, as I'll just share. But the idea here is to actually try and bring about change, if not disruptive change, in the areas that we work in. So this slide gives you a snapshot of all the programs that TMF or Tech Mahindra Foundation has. And as you can see on the left side of your screen, employability is a very important piece of our work, under which we have a program called SMART. SMART is an acronym for Skills for Market Training, S for Skills, MAR Market, and T for Training, under which we have two distinct models under which we implement. One are the smart centers and the other are the smart academies. I'll talk about both of these in a bit. And then we have education, under which our flagship program is called Shakshantha. Shakshantha, as we all know, means a change in education. And within this, we have chosen to work in the area of teacher capacity development, which we are doing both directly, as in being implemented by the foundation directly. And for this, we are working in the East Delhi and the North Delhi municipal corporations, implementing the In-Service Teacher Education Institute program. And we are also working with some of NGO partners in teacher capacity development. There's another program called Arise, in which we are working directly with schools. It's a relatively small program, but something which we are extremely passionate about. One very important piece of our work, which I would want to mention, is the work that we do around persons with disabilities. In fact, Tech Mahindra Foundation is perhaps the only corporate foundation that I know which has in its corporate social responsibility policy, in its CSR policy, it has mandated that at least 10% of all our beneficiaries would be persons with disabilities. And in keeping with that, we are implementing a program called Smart Plus, which is about bringing employability to persons with disabilities. And we are also implementing Arise Plus, in which we are working with children with special needs or children with disabilities. And we have a fairly significant presence now in this area. So moving on to what we are doing in school education, and even before that, just to give you an overall snapshot, since 2015-16, we've supported 30,404 teachers. In fact, this data is slightly dated. I think we are close to the 35,000 mark, through which we have reached out to over 128,000 children. And of course, in the year 2019-20 itself, there were 3,797 teachers and 14,225 children. In the last couple of years, of course, there has been a significant amount of disruption because of COVID. But I will talk about how we as an organization have rallied around the need to address the kind of challenges that have emerged because of COVID. So I'll talk about Shakshantha, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the flagship program under which we include all the work that we do for teacher empowerment. Now, important for me to mention that, when you're working in the area of education, you fairly soon you'll realize that there are many inputs that can be influenced when you are planning an intervention. You could work on infrastructure, you could work on pedagogy, you could work on the teaching learning material, you could work on assessments, so on and so forth. Each of these inputs in some way or the other influence the quality of learning. But when we, and initially when we started the foundation in 2007, for the first about 5 years or so, we were working on a lot of these areas. We were also working at that time in technology for education. There were some projects which were based on that. But then very soon we realized that if we were to really influence the quality of learning at scale, Mashood, you mentioned about the kind of crisis that our country has been facing when it comes to learning of children. And clearly, that's a crisis which has significantly, I would say, increased over the last 2 years. We realized that, for any single organization to be able to do justice to all of these elements is almost impossible. So we very consciously chose to focus on that one element that we as a foundation consider the most important, which is working with teachers, because we believe and continue to believe that even if you bring in technology, when it comes to early childhood and primary education particularly, the role and importance of teachers can never be undermined. So you'll always need good, qualified, capacitated teachers who are able to bring about a change. As far as education is concerned. And that was the genesis of Shakshantha. The program actually started in 2012 itself, when the East Delhi Municipal Corporation had invited us to work in the in-service teacher education institute that is running in East Delhi. And we've been working since April 2013 at East Delhi. Looking at the work that we've done there, in 2018, the North Delhi Municipal Corporation also invited us to similarly work in their in-service teacher education institute in North Delhi. Now, what that means is that East Delhi Municipal Corporation and North Delhi Municipal Corporation put together have close to, I would say, about 900 schools. What that means is that there are close to 12,000 teachers in these schools. And both these corporations have given the onerous responsibility of training these teachers to Tech Mahindra Foundation. It's something that we've been doing almost as a sacred responsibility, because we understand the implication of what we are doing when we are working with these teachers. So at both these institutes, we have dedicated teams working with the teachers. Then we also introduced a mobile science lab in 2019, in which we have a van or almost like a minibus completely fitted as a science lab, which goes from school to school in some of the far-flung areas of Delhi. Of course, soon after we launched this, unfortunately, we had to stop this because of the lockdowns, etc. But we are planning to resume this pretty soon. We are also supporting a science academy for teachers at Hyderabad, and this is in the walled city of Hyderabad, where there's not much space, crowded schools, and over there we are working with a partner with whom we are running this academy to bring about a change, not just in knowledge and concepts, but also in attitude of the teachers when it comes to the teaching of science. We had also introduced a very interesting program called English Winglish, because a lot of our state governments are now converting their schools to English medium, and we realized the need to put some additional focus on English, and therefore we came up with this program. So this in a nutshell tells you about all the work that we've been doing as far as teachers are concerned, and some more detail about ITEI. I've already spoken about our in-service teacher education institute. So I'll just move on to the next. Now, this is something that I want to show to our viewers in terms of what we have done in the last 18 months, since we were all sort of compelled to move to an online version of teaching and learning. Now, we realized fairly early on that after the pandemic struck, a lot of our teachers, especially in the government schools, were struggling with the idea of online teaching. And therefore, we introduced a training, a very dedicated program on digital literacy, in which we have trained 1,689 teachers since November 2020. And in this, all these training modules that you see, how do you teach online effectively using platforms such as Google Meet, using Google Forms, etc., are covered. Then soon after, we also saw the need to have a special training around cyber security, because a lot of teachers were also struggling with the fact that our children and even the teachers themselves did not really have too much of a knowledge about the idea of cybersecurity. So we introduced a module on cybersecurity. We've trained 471 teachers since July 2021, and the topics covered you can see on your screen. We are doing digital citizenship, online risks, so on and so forth. This also includes safety for children and the role of parents and teachers, because that is something which we consider to be extremely important. Um, Moving on, this is about the Mobile Science Lab, as I just mentioned. We started in 2019, and till 31st March 2020, the project had already benefited about 1,544 children in the schools where this Mobile Science Lab that you can see in front of you, the picture is there. The idea is that this bus goes from school to school, focusing on children of grades 3 to 5, on the subject called EVS, as we know it, environmental science, in these grades, because it's very important for children at that age to get a hands-on idea, by learning by doing, so to speak, and be a part of scientific experiments themselves. Otherwise, the teaching of science can become very drab, as we know in our classrooms. Also, I mentioned about our initiative called Arise, in which we work in schools closely. So we have a relatively small number of 18 schools where we are currently working in the Arise program. Arise stands for All-Round Improvement in School Education. And as the name suggests, we are working with a comprehensive approach, taking into account academic, social, infrastructural, and organizational inputs and parameters, which we use to intervene and improve these schools. So this is the overarching goal, empowerment through education. This is what we do. Some details about the foundation itself. I've already covered some of these. I've mentioned that disability and also women empowerment are cross-cutting themes. And that's what we do. We have impacted, since we started, close to 300,000 direct beneficiaries. And if we all understand that when you're working with teachers, there is a huge multiplier effect, because each teacher goes on to benefit a very large number of children. So I think through that, the impact of our work has really, reached out to thousands and thousands of children. Also important for me to mention that in the work that we've done around COVID relief, close to 23 lakh individuals have been benefited through the various drives that we've done. So I would sort of stop here, though I do have some slides on our education program, on our employability program, sorry. Quickly, I can tell you that, this is a program that we started in 2012, and we are working right now across the country. There are smart centers which are training youth from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds in various trades. And this is something that we are implementing through a network of NGO partners, very well chosen NGO partners who are working in the communities with a lot of dedication. And Tech Mahindra Foundation, apart from providing them the funding to do this, is also working like a resource organization, because we help them with curriculum training, quality control, etc. We also have set up smart academies, which are focusing on areas such as healthcare and digital technologies and logistics. Here we are trying to really significantly raise the bar when it comes to skill development of youth in India, because we believe that there's a very large pool of youngsters who come out of schools, sometimes come out of colleges, but lack the kind of employability skills which would help them to make a career. And that is the intent with which the smart academies have been established. I would also mention that, as I've already shared, that persons with disabilities is an important part of our work. We are working with children with disabilities through a network of projects under Arise Plus. Quickly, you could go through some of the points that are mentioned there. Within this, I would want to mention that we are focusing on the idea of bringing assistive technology for children with disabilities, because we believe that all children, deserve to learn well, and especially when it comes to children with special needs or children with disabilities, there is a lot of, assistive technology that is available out there, but has still not reached some of the children. So we are working on that. And also in Smart Plus, we are working to ensure that that the youth who have a disability can lead independent and dignified lives through a variety of programs that we are doing with them. I would also want to just mention about a very interesting thing that we've introduced recently. This is an aggregator platform for mental wellness services called Mind at Ease, as you can see. And this is something that we've launched in October 2020, because we realized that mental well-being is something which is emerging as a very significant area in which we need to do something. So we have collaborated with the World Health Organization for this, and we've organized a mental health awareness week as well. The idea behind Mind at Ease is to bring together service providers who can provide counseling to people from all walks of life when it comes to not just mental health, but we've also included career guidance here. So I would stop here, Mashood. I hope I have managed to take you all through, what is it that Tech Mahindra Foundation is, and what it does. And if there are any questions on what I have shared so far, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Chetan ji, for this really power-packed presentation, and for taking us through some of these, wonderful initiatives which Tech Mahindra Foundation is leading. It's very important to note here the commitment that your team has for inclusive education, inclusive development, because you're looking at children who with different needs, with disabilities. You are and you're also looking at a lot of new challenges which children are facing with respect to digital, right? So the question of digital citizenship, the question of safety. Now these are as we see that more adoption of digital is happening, all these challenges are coming up as well, and it's so wonderful to see that you've already kind of on it and leading the way and sharing experiences with others. So I would like to actually start by asking you a bit more about uh, we've seen this shift to the digital, and it had been happening for several years even before the pandemic, but now there's more adoption and acceptance. Even teachers traditionally who would not use digital as as something which is innovation and not really necessary, has are now kind of often forced to do it in a way. Do you see that the schools that you're working with, how has been the adoption of digital and these new these new challenges of child safety and all of that? How has been the experience of teachers and your experience of your teams with respect to acceptance and adoption, and some learnings if you would like to share from on this?
Sure, Mashood. Yes. So, if one were to just sort of step back first and look at the entire education landscape, traditionally, schools, not just in India, but across the world, it's believed uh, are those which take time in terms of changing. So schools are normally hesitant to change. I mean, unlike, for example, the corporate sector or any other sector that you pick up, where change happens at a more agile manner. Schools, if you think about it, as an institution, schools have been fairly similar for the last several decades. Now, and that's how it has been, because what we do understand is that while a lot of technology has been available, schools have been relatively slower in embracing it. And I'm not saying that technology just for the sake of it needs to be embraced, but there are ways by which technology can really augment the functioning of a school in various ways, not necessarily just academic, but even in terms of looking at data, for example, is something which can be done through technology. Now, in that context, once COVID was upon us, and it was pretty clear that there's nothing that can really happen in the physical world, so to speak, I think all of us were compelled to take an online approach to everything. And this included the schools, this included teachers who were actually almost overnight compelled to use technology in terms of their learning. Now, I'll go into the fact that we also cannot look at the whole landscape through a single lens. We know that India, in some ways, there is so much of diversity, and we know that almost 25% of our children continue to be deprived of any digital device. I'm not just talking about internet, but there are large segments of the population who still do not have access to a digital device, at least not one which can be used properly by children for education. So that is one segment that has to be looked at, slightly differently. But if we were to focus on those at least who have access to a digital device, which can be used for learning, which means that it has it is available with the children. It has a smart screen wherein you can show lessons, and it has internet connectivity. I think these are essential elements which are required. Now, if I were to focus on those children who have these, even for them, when it comes to using the device as a learning device, is something that has only happened in the last 18 months. Prior to this, these devices were not primarily looked at as learning devices at all. They were more entertainment, gaming, all of that. So that is one shift that has happened more from the students' end. The bigger shift has been on the teachers' end, because a lot of them, when they were compelled to take a class on Zoom, it was the first time ever in their lives that they were using a platform like Zoom. We were still used to a platform like Zoom or Skype or Google Meet, etc. But for the teachers, it was a completely new experience. And as we can imagine, a lot of them struggled initially. That is where we stepped in and realized that, at least for the teachers that we are working in, there has to be a mechanism by which we could get them to at least learn the basics of how do you conduct a session online, and what are the various features that these platforms offer. So in that sense, I think now that most teachers across our country, whether it is government schools or private school teachers, are at least aware of what is possible by using a digital device when it comes to teaching. I think in some ways COVID has meant an opportunity within a crisis, because there has clearly been a quantum leap in terms of of the ability of teachers to use a digital device for learning. So in that sense, there has definitely been a quantum leap. Now it is up to us to, kind of see how do we take this forward, because it's easy to sort of regress. Now that the schools are opening, the children are coming back to our schools, the comfort zone would be to quickly go back to where we were pre-COVID and continue things in the same kind of a format. I have a feeling that there will be many schools which, will kind of just go into that. But I think if you were to take a more nuanced view of this, and a more I would say enlightened view, I think it's important to take forward with us those things which we know has really benefited us by the use of technology. In some ways, COVID has made it very clear to us what is possible using technology in learning and what is not possible. So in the context of our skill development programs, for example, we know that when it comes to equipping students with technical skills which require hands-on training, there's not too much that you can do using a virtual platform. You have to get the students into labs. For example, we are training in our vocational training, we are doing training around automobile technicians, for example. Now for that, you have to bring the students to a center. But when it comes to some of the other areas like communication skills, some of the skills that we, like for example, selling, we have several modules on customer relationship and sales. Now, these are things which are relatively lend themselves to an online mode better. Similarly, when it comes to teaching children also, there are certain areas where you have a lot of interactive modules available, which can continue to be done in an online manner. But we know that when it comes to working with very small children, in equipping them with not just literacy and numeracy, but also going into things like social learning, getting them to working with their emotions, that human touch is indispensable. So that is something which is definitely required. So I would say that is how we need to look at this moving forward.
Right. Thank you, Chetanji, for sharing your thoughts on that. And it's interesting how you're saying that as schools continue to reopen and children trickle back into the school space, it'll be interesting to see what is the scale at which these technology continues to remain. We are seeing evidence that technology was kind of being used more as a more strategically by teachers now, and they're kind of making it part of mainstream learning, teaching, learning, because there is more acceptance that digital is a lot of, for example, workplaces have now shifted completely digitally. So with that, changes in the larger economy, then the school system also aligns with that. Here I would also like to ask the question on Tech Mahindra's approach to developing 21st century skills among children. If you look at the pre-COVID time versus the time after COVID, and the way forward, in fact, do you see that your teams there is any change in your team strategy which is required or which is being planned? And also, how are these? If you could also tell our audience that how important is it to review what the curriculum or what the classroom environment regarding 21st century skills needs to be, with respect to the changing world, with respect to how things are moving in the economy, how things are, like what is relevant today might not be relevant tomorrow. And you've of course been at the highest policy levels, at the level of FICI. You have advised and given your inputs with respect to skill development. So how do we make sure that the education system kind of keeps pace with the changing world? These are a lot of questions, I know, but but your thoughts would be very welcome on this.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Mashud. See, I think first it's very important to sort of decode what is it that we really mean by 21st century skills. It's almost become like a buzzword. Ever since the 21st century came upon us, we've been hearing this term. It's been 20 years already that we are into the 21st century. Now, if you think about it, if you step back again and think about it, you would realize that progressive schools, even before COVID, even in the previous century, so to speak, had been including a lot of skills and competencies as a part of their curriculum, which were beyond just the acquisition of knowledge, which is what most of the curriculum in our schools traditionally happens to be. But there have been progressive schools which have looked beyond just the academic inputs which are usually given to children. And these schools have been few and far between, but now we know that schools such as Rishi Valley, for example, and there are several others, where the students have gone on to achieve things which may not be considered, the most successful from the traditional way of looking at things, but just in terms of their leading a more meaningful life. We've seen that there have been a few examples of schools in India outside which have attempted that successfully. I think it's important to understand that every school or every mechanism where you have a set of facilitators and students coming together has the potential to do that. It's we ourselves sometimes tend to constrain ourselves in certain frameworks that have been created over time and tend to just look within those frameworks. But when it comes to, for example, social emotional learning, which is now being talked about as being an important 21st century skill, because that's something which leads to the kind of life that a child would go on to lead. Now, it's not like the need for social emotional learning has emerged overnight. It's always been there. It's just that we now need to very consciously include components of that into our curriculum in various aspects. So now we know that institutions such as NCRT, for example, are actively looking at social, emotional, ethical learning and we've seen how the Delhi government, for example, has brought about the happiness curriculum within its fold. Now, these are some of the things which are already happening. I think going forward, the pandemic, what it has done is to underscore the importance of some of these things very clearly. So any education system which wants to sort of make a lasting impact will have to include some of these components into the curriculum, and make sure that the teachers are adequately prepared for that. Also, when it comes to the vocational side of it, as you rightly said, there are going to be a lot of careers tomorrow which don't even exist today. So what that really means is that we have to prepare our children to address uncertainty, because essentially that's what we've also just faced over the last 1.5 years, because none of us were really prepared for this. We were forced into a situation. Now we know that this may not be the last time that something like this has happened, because the kind of challenges which not just India but globally we are facing, when you look at climate change, when you look at disruptive technology, intrusive technology, when you look at how some of these forces are sort of aligning themselves around us, I think we have to just prepare our children to be better prepared with a future which is fraught with uncertainty. And I think if we can do that, if we can make sure that the foundational when we talk about FLN, foundational literacy and numeracy, I would say it's the foundational part which is even more important than literacy and numeracy. You'll have to think about it. What are the foundations which are required for children to really succeed in their lives in the true sense? Okay, and for that you'll realize that it has to go beyond literacy and numeracy. Literacy and numeracy, of course, are the basics. That is something which has to be there. But if you can't look at it through the very narrow lens of just the ability to be able to read, write, and do basic math, that of course is essential, but you will have to include the essential element of social skills, emotional learning to go along with all of this. So I hope I have managed to address some of the points that you had raised, Mushuda.
Yes, it's very interesting to know your thoughts, Chetanji, on this, and you're right, and we would agree with that. The When we are talking about foundational literacy and numeracy, so literacy and numeracy are essentially those gateway skills which are just the very first step, right? And in fact, the tragedy being that many children still are not even to take that first step, or are slipping at the first step. And if we talk about kind of we also talking about how to help our teachers reach that level, such that they are able to kind of you know while dealing with all the challenges they themselves find themselves in, because of course pandemic has been difficult for teachers as well. How do we kind of create that intrinsic motivation within them, so that they know that that they are able to kind of create that environment for the child. And Tech Mahindra Foundation also, in its values, believes in creating like a child centric education. So would you like to share maybe an example or a success story about how the foundation's work in education has helped kind of enable teachers or support teachers in kind of creating child-centric environments where children can go and flourish, and like you said, have the resilience to deal with uncertainty?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, there's several case studies, I would say, and ever since we started working in the area of teacher capacity development, we knew that we couldn't sort of just keep it restricted to subject teaching. That, of course, is part of it, because we are working with primary grade teachers, and especially in Delhi, in the primary schools, every teacher has to work with every subject. So it's not like it's not like it's just Hindi or science or math, etc. And therefore, we when we started, we ensured that we had very solid subject related modules to ensure that every teacher would get that. But then and something which I've been a very strong proponent of right from the beginning is that more than what you teach children, it is how you teach children, which is important, because children can learn a lot by themselves, especially in present day and age when you have Google with you and all of these things. The what part of learning happens, but how do we work with children? Now, what are the kind of necessary facilitation skills that a teacher needs to have? How do you sort of transition from being just a teacher to a facilitator in the true sense? How do you inculcate within you, the necessary qualities and discipline which is required for you to become a role model for the child, is something that we've been trying to bring into the training workshops that we do. So we worked very hard on our own staff for that, because it requires you to sort of move to that level where you can get to that stage. You talked about intrinsic motivation. I feel ideally teachers is one vocation, or teaching is one vocation, where intrinsic motivation should not be a problem, because the joy that you get when you work with a set of young children, and when you are able to sort of help them learn new things, do new things, become better individuals, I think there is a lot of joy that anybody can derive out of that. So from that perspective, I think it's important for education systems, including a small system such as Tech Mahindra Foundation, in what we are doing, to make sure that we are able to create the right kind of environment, whether it is the infrastructure. So that is one which sort of should be very conducive to the idea of an ideal interaction between teachers and learners. So we know, for example, that with small children, the traditional way of getting children to be sitting in a theater style in a classroom does not work. You have to get them close to the teacher. You have to get them to sit in a circle perhaps, and you need to teach them in a certain way which allows joy along with learning. So some of these things we have integrated into the way that we work. And if you go to some of the schools in East Delhi and North Delhi, where the teachers who we've been working with for the last several years, many of them have brought in these changes into their respective classrooms to ensure that children get a more meaningful environment to learn. Because once you're able to create that environment well, once you are able to really transition from being just a teacher to a facilitator or a mentor, a lot of learning would just sort of follow, because what you are essentially doing at a young age is to igniting that sense of curiosity and the intent and the willingness among the children to learn. Okay, I think every child is born with a sense of curiosity and and an intention to learn new things, and it is, I think, for our teachers, for our schools, to ensure that this inherent curiosity that children have, that continues to flourish. Unfortunately, what's been happening in our education system is that many a times this inherent curiosity that's there in the children kind of gets diluted over the years. So that's what we are trying to do. And in that, whether we have to use technology, whether we have to use any kind of resources to enable the teachers to think differently, to do all of these things, we are trying to do this.
It's wonderful to know about this vision, and it is in a way it is a vision which is disruptive, because it really challenges the the traditional uh, for the decades long or maybe centuries long system which we have kind of in a way inherited from our previous colonial kind of setup, that it's hierarchical systems of education, and like sitting in, like you say, like a row and columns, like kind of an industrial system. um uh, the challenge would often still remain, and I would love to maybe know your thoughts on this as well, that even if when we work with teachers, and they often themselves have been a product of a very hierarchical traditional education system. And even if there are teachers who, who feel that, okay, let's do something which is child centric, let's do something which is innovative, let's completely change how learning was is done in my class as compared to how it was when I was a child. Even if that mindset is created, the often the challenge remains that, okay, is my school head going to appreciate me on that? Is Are they going to understand that I'm working on the 21st century skills of students, but it's not something which is part of maybe the curriculum, or it's not something which my review or appraisal is going to look at. They're just going to look at the marks. So if we talk about also changing the mindset with respect to school managers and school heads, what has been your team's experience with respect to transforming teachers, but also like maybe creating that ecosystem around them? Any successes, any any learnings with respect to getting to work with the school heads?
Yes, so I would say, not just for us, but across the board, working with school leaders is, kind of sometimes proved to be more daunting, more challenging, because there are multiple, factors at play there. But what we've seen, and what I've seen, not just here in Tech Mahindra Foundation, but even in the work that I've done in the past, Mashood, is that if you go into it with the right intent, if you go into it well prepared with the kind of resources that you would want to impart to the teachers, and if you are able to demonstrate that you are there to effectively make a difference to the lives of the teachers and the children, most school leaders ultimately let you do what you would want to do. So they may, I mean, depending on who the individual is, in some cases we've seen school leaders actively participating in the trainings that we do. But even if they do not participate, at least if they just kind of ensure that yes, the teachers are attending the sessions, they are part of the training workshops that we conduct, then even that we consider as a huge victory, because they are at least acknowledging the need to do this. Also, coming to your question about how do we how do what kind of disruption we try and do, is that in every teacher training institute, or every place that we have an intervention related to teacher training, it's not like it's isolated from the children. So there is always, in case of both the ITEIs that we are running in Delhi, these are situated next to an MCD school, which means that these schools can serve as laboratories where the teachers can go and actually try out some of the things that they are being trained on. And I think this is something which is extremely important. In fact, in my early days in Pratham, that is one of the big lessons that I came back with, is that you can't compartmentalize the idea of teacher training and curriculum and assessment. These things have to work in tandem, and for teachers to be really prepared and trained, they have to work with children. You have to take the whatever that they are doing, and therefore, what we do at Tech Mahindra Foundation, Mashood, in order to maximize our impact, what we try to do is that while we work with teachers and we do not work with children directly, but the measure of success for us is what the teachers are then doing with the children. And therefore, we have classroom observation, for example, built into the program design. So the teachers who are trained by us, our team members also then later on go into their classrooms to see how they are actually kind of translating the vision that we have when we train them into the classrooms where they work. So in that sense, it's not like we are looking at teacher training in isolation. I think there is an approach and a thought which has gone into designing the whole idea of teacher capacity building.
Right. Thank you, Chetanji, for your thoughts. Here, I would also like to invite comments and questions from Dr. Sunita Gandhi, who's been intently listening to your presentation and our conversation. Dr. Gandhi, we've had a wonderful conversation with Mr. Chetan Kapoor, and he's talked about his vision about 21st century skills among children, and how we need to kind of look at foundational learning and also include other soft skills as well. Your thoughts and questions.
Chetan, it's just been absolutely delightful listening to you, and all the passion and commitment is obviously very clear. Teacher training is a very elusive subject because, I mean, typically we train teachers and then they revert back to how they forever were. So the elasticity is not as high as it needs to be. Um, and how do we mold teachers? You've obviously created centers of excellence using teacher training as a starting point. Now you just mentioned for a minute about observation and how you're taking a holistic approach with the teacher training being along with curriculum and assessments, and I totally agree with that. I think you've been incubating something quite different and making a big difference and showing that teacher training can be a very good leverage to bring about tremendous change in the way learning is transacted. So, we're talking about a process in which it's not just about learning, it's also about, as you said earlier, about emotional development, social development of the children, and the very foundational skills you mentioned are these, not just literacy and numeracy. And I so concur with you. And of course, here comes the idea of a teacher as an exemplar, that the teacher is role modeling those values and those emotional connects and relationships with the children, so the children feel nurtured and cared for, and not just another statistic or another, like a day done and I'm not connected to them. So I think that one of the things that I've been sort of dabbling with is how to create an intrinsic motivation in the teachers. So one, of course, way is that when you're observing, they're kind of moving towards that direction. But isn't that a little bit of like an old way in a way, because they're still trying to please somebody else, right? Or to live up to the expectations of somebody else, maybe the principal or the people who are coming to review their work. And how to turn that around so that it comes from within, their love for the child, their ability to see that they are actually making a contribution to society and so forth. Any thoughts on that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Dr. Gandhi, and pleasure to meet you here. Yes, I mean, we all, I think, agree that, when we look at it through the lens of pragmatism, getting teachers to be intrinsically motivated all the time can be a daunting challenge, because that's not what the reality is. But of course, we have to keep chipping at it, and as you rightly said, that it can't be driven externally. At the end of the day, there has to be strong internal motivators. And I said earlier that when it comes to working with children, most of us would agree that there is a lot of satisfaction and joy and pleasure that can be derived once you have a fulfilling session, useful session with children. So I think the systems that we create around teachers and children, starting with the school, starting with the block level, district level, state level, national level systems that are created, they all must ultimately lead to ensuring that that every teacher who comes into the system with the intent of making a positive difference to the lives of children gets ample opportunity to do so. Without too many encumbrances, without too many obstructions in this. So for that, a lot of these things have to align. The second thing, which is very important, is that systemically, I don't think we have thought enough about the idea of the progression of teachers, because teachers, like any of us, are professionals. They, would expect that once they are performing over the years in their respective roles, there could be some kind of progression in their journey, in terms of their career, in terms of the kind of certification or accolades that they receive, and therefore there could be mechanisms that can be created by which a teacher, after having successfully completed X number of years of working, could be given the incentive of upskilling herself through a course which has an international repute, for example. So I think these are some of the things which must be brought within the existing mechanism, wherein we are able to really make sure that the kind of belief and approach and philosophy with which we approach education for children would hold true for the teachers as well. So just giving the teachers the liberty to have a more say also when it comes to the curriculum, for example, or when it comes to the term which is always used is completing the syllabus complete karna hai. This is what we hear in our schools all the time. Now I think that it's an idea well past its sell by date. I don't think we need to have be into that mold where you have to complete the syllabus, because in some ways you are actually restricting the kind of freedom that the teacher will have in terms of pacing her class. And I think every good teacher would want to understand where the learners are, who my learners are, and where I would want to take them at the end of a session. So I think that is something which should be left to the teacher to decide, that what is within the framework that an NCRT or a CBSE puts together. How do I have to get my students from point A to point B should be left to the teachers. I think that will also add a lot of intrinsic motivation here.
I think that's phenomenal what you've been sharing, and it's correct. And maybe also the thought that has come from PISA. It was Andreas Schleicher who mentioned we host a conference called Ed Leadership every year. So he mentioned that in 2016, they did a very exhaustive study of all the PISA countries, and what lends to better performance of the children and therefore better performance of the teacher. And they kind of surmised that one of the things that's really working is when teachers share between themselves,
Yes.
and when they are also mentored by each other in a way, in that sense,
Yeah.
indirectly, directly. So that, I think, to mainstream that would be perhaps worth a try, because data is quite compelling, that's creating a lot of higher standards, and of course intrinsic motivation, because they're sharing what they're doing with their peers, and that seems to be a better motivation, let's say, or more creates a desire to excel more than, say, when they have to please others.
Absolutely, and I think the fact that we now have access to technology like never before, I think that's something which is eminently possible, because you can create such platforms where you get teachers together to share their views, and share their ideas and their experiences within the classrooms with children. And I think that needs to become more and more part of the mainstream.
Yes, very true. So I think I would love to have you as my advisor, because you've shared so many great thoughts, and it's actually, yes, very insightful talking to you. I was just wondering to what extent your work has influenced policy, or has been looked at by others and therefore expanded upon, because obviously the scale of the problem is humongous, and every drop of effort we do is absolutely germane. But then if you have found certain nuggets of truth, for example, how you convert the belief system of the teacher, which is really so important, the mindset itself, that perhaps others could look into this and expand upon it.
Well, so yes, absolutely, Dr. Gandhi. That's something which we would welcome, for others to look at what we've done and replicate wherever that they want to. See, so far consciously we have not stepped into the area of advocacy, because I think when it comes to working in education, working with teachers, etc., there is a lot of deep diving which is required. There is a lot of you have to do a lot of intensive work with the teachers. And I feel that somewhere we, even though we've been working on this for the last 8-10 years, there is still some ground to be covered before we can say that, okay, this is an established model, you can take it, replicate it. But as far as our practices and systems are concerned, as far as our approach is concerned, we are an open book. And as I mentioned, that we have the centers in East Delhi and North Delhi. And if there's anyone who wants to, reach out to us, visit us, meet the teams which are working here, more than welcome to share. In fact, within the NGO partner ecosystem that we have, and we've been working with a large number of NGOs. We very regularly hold sharing sessions, and ask them to share what they've done with each other. As I mentioned earlier, one very important area of work for us is inclusion. That's something which we are getting more and more sort of passionate about, because we realize the value of making a more inclusive world, not just as a for the namesake, but in the true sense. So we are trying to see how we can get more children from vulnerable segments into the mainstream, into the classrooms. We've been doing a lot of work with children with disabilities, and are trying to see how some of the practices that prevail globally can be brought to India.
Right.
Yes, indeed. I think research both ways, in the sense of integrating what's already been found all over the world, and
Yeah.
why reinvent the wheel? If that works, then why not? So we are big fans of John Hattie,
Yes.
and others. So yeah, the research part also in terms of like whatever you are doing. For example, if it could be set up in a research design context and shared, so that way others will learn about it, and perhaps will be more able to see your model. Have you thought about that? Are you publishing your data? Because I'd love to be one of the consumers of that data.
Yes, Dr. Gandhi, thanks for bringing that up, because it's something which is, very dear to us. Just about 2.5 years back, we set up an internal RME unit, a research monitoring and evaluation unit, where the mandate first was to ensure that we ourselves transcend from our roles as just being practitioners to researchers as well. And so what we did, and especially all my colleagues who are working at the In-Service Teacher Education Institute now for the third year running, have been taking on small action research projects within the ambit of the work that they're doing. So, before we start propagating it, I mean, at least that's my belief, that we must be fairly strong internally. And that's what we've been working on. Very soon, perhaps next year itself, we hope to hold our first research conference, in which we are going to invite an external set of people. We are also working with the academia on this, because we realize that the kind of interface that's required between academia and practitioners such as us does not really exist to the extent that it should in a country like ours. So we do hope to do that as well going forward. You're on mute, Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have a school community here in Lucknow called City International School, which I am treating as a laboratory school. And in that, every teacher is a researcher and a scientist. So they create their own research design. They create the hypotheses, and need, if you like, and then they work on that. They collect data around it. Then they make a presentation of their research to the other members of the school community, and this is mainstreamed. So we've got loads of really good evidence for new practice, and this is included things that are very difficult to measure. Um, I'm like peace table skills, or life skills, or teamwork skills, and so forth, which are really really difficult to measure. But the teachers have ventured out and tried to create something around it, and it's pretty remarkable. As a result, they've learned a lot, and they become very very exceptional teachers. So ordinary teachers have become very extraordinary with that
Right.
effort. So I'm so happy to find that you're actually holding a research conference for this. And I'd love to also compare notes on when you mentioned progression of the teachers. How do you measure the progression of the teacher? What are the parameters, 1, 2, 3, 4, and are they objective, subjective? Who measures? those issues. It'd be lovely to discuss with you.
Certainly. I mean, some of these things I would say are still work in progress as far as we are concerned, but we would love to share at the right time and at the right platform.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you so much. I hand over to Mashood now to take over. Yeah,
Right.
next presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for your thoughts and questions. And once again, we would like to really show our appreciation and gratitude to Mr. Chetan Kapoor. You've really helped us rethink about the foundations and the amazing work that your team is doing at Tech Mahindra Foundation with its passion for inclusive education, something which not a lot of NGOs or foundations are focusing on. It's truly wonderful to see that you're like uh, a beacon of light in this area of inclusive education as well, and also trying to help uh, transform the teacher capacity building space as well. Uh, Thank you so much for joining us here on Dtalks. We hope that all those who have been watching us live and who will be watching this video in the coming time as well learn from this, and we look forward to the some of the findings and some of the insights that come across from your initiatives in the coming year as well. uh, Once again, thank you, Chetanji, for your time and joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Mashood and Dr. Gandhi, for this wonderful opportunity. It was a real pleasure uh, participating in this and being a part of Detox. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chetanji. Namaskar.